Hi there, and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about fatigue and other low energy symptoms. I'll answer the questions. How do I overcome fatigue? Is fatigue TMS? I'll let you know what that is if you haven't heard of it. When do I push past fatigue? How do I use mind body healing for exhaustion, brain fog, and post exertional malaise? If you're new here, I'm Rebecca Tolin, a mind body coach and the creator of the Be Your Own Medicine course. So, first, I invite you to tune into your own body. Just notice where your body is supported by the surface you're on. So, whether you're standing, sitting, or laying down, can you relax any muscles that you don't need to clench right now? I noticed that my shoulders just dropped a little bit. So see how it feels just to let go of your jaw, your shoulders, your arms, your belly, any place that you're tensing. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story and then talk about what you actually do about fatigue, because I get a lot of questions about this. So I started treating ME/CFS as TMS. And TMS is a term that was coined by Dr. John Sarno. It stands for tension myositis syndrome. But basically, Dr. Sarno realized that a stressed brain creates chronic symptoms. He talked a lot about the role of unprocessed and repressed emotions in keeping the brain and nervous system activated. And now there's a lot of other physicians, psychologists, and research that is proving the validity and the efficacy of this work. So back when I had ME/CFS for so many years, there weren't a lot of people talking about how to apply this TMS approach to fatigue. But I met one woman and she made the link for me. And she explained that she overcame chronic fatigue syndrome through this mind body approach. And just from hearing her story, this light bulb went off and I actually started running around the block. I had not run in many years. So I tell more about my story in my Crash to Cure video, which I'll link up above. Now, the great news is there's lots of people talking about how they're recovering from chronic fatigue, long COVID, and other post-viral syndromes through this approach. Okay, so is fatigue TMS, or what is often called a neuroplastic symptom? Yes, it usually is, but the thing that you want to do first is rule out anything pathological or structural with your physician. So any primary care physician can do tests just to rule out an acute infection, a thyroid disorder, or something like that that is treatable. But if doctors can't find any definitive cause, you are left with mind-body symptoms. Now, what happens, you've probably noticed when you go to more and more doctors, is you rack up more and more diagnoses. I personally was told it was Epstein-Barr reactivation, chronic Lyme, mold toxicity, and many other things. I tried the treatments for those to varying degrees, and they never helped me, and I really remained stuck. And later, I did quite a bit of research on Epstein-Barr virus, and it works out that 90 to 95% of all adults will test positive to the antibodies for Epstein-Barr. All that means is you've been exposed to the virus at some point and you have antibodies. And a lot of people who have antibodies, and in fact, even at high levels, don't have symptoms. So there's another driving force. There's similar studies with chronic Lyme showing that treating this with long-term antibiotics isn't effective. Similar with mold toxicity, there are many people who are exposed to mold in their environment, but they don't have chronic symptoms. And so there's something else that is driving this. And with mind body healing, what we understand that to be is the brain and nervous system. When I learned this knowledge, it completely changed my life. So, what's actually causing the fatigue? Whether it's weakness, brain fog, post exertional malaise, and other mind body symptoms in this constellation, they are danger signals from the brain, just as chronic pain is. So, when our unconscious brain senses danger, it activates the autonomic nervous system. There are a cascade of actual biochemical changes in our body, in our brain wiring, nerve firing, blood flow, heart rate, muscle tension, hormone production. There are real changes that happen because of a real or perceived perception of danger. Our autonomic nervous system goes into flight, fight, or freeze, and we get flooded with stress hormones. Now, this alone feels really crummy, especially when we can't run away from that proverbial lion. Now, something else that's really important to understand is the brain can create any sensation in the body. And neuroscience now teaches us that, in fact, the brain does generate pain, the brain does generate fatigue. The brain generates these sensations because of what it's perceiving in the unconscious. So it could be achiness, spaciness, dizziness, tinnitus. There's a whole range of symptoms we can experience when we go into this threat response. These symptoms are communication between our brain and our body. It's our unconscious brain that's trying to protect us. And a lot of times people think, well, I didn't feel scared when I got this big flurry of symptoms. But we're talking about the part of our brain that is below our conscious awareness. And it's kind of staggering to think that that's 90 to 95% of our thoughts and emotions we are not aware of. But if you think of the unconscious brain, it's beating your heart and it's digesting your food without you having to consciously think about it. It also generates symptoms when it senses danger. So this happens whether there's a perceived sense of danger from an emotional stressor or a physical stressor. So the limbic brain essentially treats financial worries like a predator. It sees relationship stress like a mountain lion. The same brain centers get activated. And essentially, when we experience fatigue, it's a message from the brain you need to go inward, you need to rest and recover. You see animals in the wild who are being chased by a predator, and they will go into that freeze response when their subconscious perceives that it can't fight or flee from the threat. And we're mammals as well. We can also look at this through polyvagal theory, which was helpful to me as well. This response, called freeze often, is actually referred to as dorsal vagal or shutdown in polyvagal theory. Essentially, it's a state of collapse. And we'll have different symptoms in this state. It can be lethargy, depression, weakness, complete numbness or disassociation from the body, spaciness, difficulty concentrating or focusing, as is often called brain fog. And this is why I found that fatigue conditions can take a little more finesse. Because if your subconscious brain is sensing an actual life threat, whether this is rational or not, and you try to override it completely, it might just scare your system more. So, when do I push past fatigue? I really prefer to use the word challenge rather than push. So, tune into how it feels to say, I've got to push past this. When I said things like that to myself, I started realizing that it actually really felt scary, and I started tensing up around that. But when I said things like, I can challenge myself. I'm ready to do this. I'm capable to do this. I felt a lot more courage and a lot more safety. So notice your language because we really want to support our physiology to move out of this threat response. And a lot of pressure and fear do not help that. In fact, when we're feeling overwhelmed with symptoms, we first want to find a felt sense of safety. That could happen through breath work. So it could be if you're in a flight fight response, often doing a longer exhale is really helpful. If you're in this dorsal vagal response where you're really exhausted, doing a balanced breath work like the box breath, which is equal parts inhale, hold, exhale, and hold can be helpful. Just grounding, sort of feeling yourself on the earth, like I guided you into a little bit at the beginning of this talk. That can be helpful. Different types of somatic meditations were extremely helpful for me to calm my nervous system. But find whatever works for you. Sometimes it's just going out in nature and taking a little walk, or sitting under a tree, petting your cat, or drinking a cup of hot tea. When you feel a sense of overwhelming emotions or symptoms, you want to come back to safety. Then, when you feel relatively safe, that's time to challenge yourself. So, you're still probably going to have symptoms if you've had chronic fatigue, but you're able to observe the sensations with mindful awareness. So, you want to then take baby steps into activities with safety messages and with this somatic awareness. This is how you retrain your brain that you're capable of doing more activity. It's not necessarily easy, but it is simple because you really can't rest your way out of the fatigue fear loop. I tried that for 13 years and I got more and more stuck. You need to move and you need to expose yourself to these triggering activities again. So, let me talk about a metaphor. Say that you want to learn how to swim, but you are terrified of the water. You can't learn how to swim unless you actually get in the water. But you can't jump right into the deep end, right? It will completely freak out your system. So at first, you want to expose yourself in gentle ways. You might just look at a pool and try to appreciate the beauty of the water. You might walk around the pool. You imagine yourself swimming in the pool with ease. You could dip in a hand or a foot. Now, eventually, say it's time to wade into the shallow end. If you're afraid of water still, you will get symptoms and sensations. You might get a clenching in your stomach or something else that your nervous system is communicating to you. But it's a mistaken sense of danger because, say, you're just in the shallow end, you're not actually threatened. The same thing happens when we're retraining our brain around neuroplastic symptoms. Say there's an activity that causes post exertional malaise. So it could be walking. Know that you are absolutely physically capable of that activity. You might feel you're deconditioned, but you are capable of walking. Your subconscious brain doesn't know that yet. So you can retrain your brain with action. One thing I found that's really important that often gets overlooked is do it with self compassion rather than self criticism. I used to just completely beat myself up that I wasn't recovering more quickly and I wasn't contributing to the world. And little did I know that was actually scaring my poor amygdala more and keeping me locked in this cycle. So tune into what you need to feel safe and supported. And one thing I really love about mind body healing is we're befriending ourselves again. And think about yourself as you would a child or a dear friend and use the same language and behaviors that you would to encourage that person with yourself. It's also helpful to make it fun. When you're challenging a trigger, something that causes symptoms, see how you can spice it up. If you really were wanting to learn how to swim again, you might just float on a raft rather than pressuring yourself to jump right in the deep end. I did this for all my triggers for many months because I had lived such a restrictive life. I had been told by lots of doctors and lots of practitioners that my adrenals were shot, I was very fragile, I shouldn't do very much. And so I didn't. And then when I did anything out of my routine, even within my routine, it caused a lot of symptoms. So I exposed myself with graded exposure in small baby steps and retrained my brain, even though it wasn't fun for a long time. I mean, I would like go out and walk around the block and I'd have insomnia that night and I would have a lot of symptoms the next day. But I knew this was the way. And I knew that my subconscious brain was essentially responding to the cues that my conscious brain was giving it. So I took the opportunity to really say, these sensations aren't dangerous, and I can just be with them physically in my body. And so that leads me to my next point. How do I overcome fatigue? Of course, this is what you want to know if you're dealing with any of these symptoms, and know that whatever I'm saying works for the whole constellation of symptoms that people typically experience with chronic fatigue, ME/CFS, long COVID, or other conditions. So you want to show your brain and your body that you're safe. You learn the knowledge to teach your conscious brain that your body is safe, but also soothe your nervous system and your body with somatic practices. So there's about 25 different somatic meditations in my Be Your Own Medicine course. These were practices that really helped me safely reconnect to my body and reestablish a sense of safety. Because when we're disassociated from our body, we don't actually feel safe. But find what works for you. There's lots of great practices out there. It can also just be really informal things, like I mentioned before, body movement. It can be qigong or yoga or sitting in nature and looking up at the leaves. It can be EFT tapping or different types of psychological therapy that focus on the somatic body. It's also just really helpful to explore the language of your emotions. Learn to name your emotions, honor them, and allow them in your body. Somatic tracking can be a really powerful tool to retrain our brain that both the physical sensations and emotional sensations in our body are safe. And sometimes when we just allow the emotions, they become energy in motion and they move up and out. Sometimes they just need to stay inside of us, and that's okay too. We don't want to fear these sensations or these emotions. We just want to learn to welcome them and observe them through this lens of safety. And that turns down the danger alarm signal in the brain. So, you also want to challenge your triggers by stepping into these activities that you really want to do through this lens of safety. So, to wrap this all up, how do I use mind body healing for fatigue, brain fog, PEM, and similar symptoms? I get this question a lot, and it is similar to using this approach for chronic pain, but it has the caveats that I mentioned earlier. It's really helpful to learn to recognize these symptoms as loving messengers from your nervous system. And it's up to you using your conscious mind to interpret the message. Is there a real danger here? Am I in danger? The vast majority of the time, there's no real clear and present danger. But there can be a sense of emotional vulnerability. So, in that case, you might ask, what do I need to feel safe emotionally? Do I need to set a boundary? Do I need to stand up to fear? Do I need to take better care of myself? Do I need to treat myself with more compassion? So, really tuning into your emotional state and your needs, as we do with mindful self compassion, is an important part of recovering from fatigue conditions as well. And then finally, to ask, do I feel safe enough right now to challenge myself so I can retrain my brain? Or do I need a soothing activity to come back to safety? And know that there's no right or wrong. Wherever you are is where you are, and you want to learn to honor that, because that truly is your healing path. So I've shared a lot here, and I just invite you to notice your body again now. So are you more tense right now? And if you are, just again, kind of breathe into your body, let your muscles go. That could be a defense mechanism from your brain and body if anything I'm saying kind of feels threatening or feels uncomfortable. And no, that's completely normal. I don't take it personally. I thought this whole approach was nuts when I first learned about it. Um, or do you notice a little less tension, maybe a little more relaxation or a little more hope? That can be a sign that what I'm sharing gives you more support or safety. If anything that I said struck a chord with you, write that down and try it out. I really encourage you to practice this because that is how we, retrain these learned neural pathways in our brain. I want you to know that I have been there. I know what it's like to feel completely stuck and desperate to reclaim a sense of vitality and safety in my body and my life. And I want you to know that it is possible to recover from these mind body symptoms. It happens by learning the knowledge and practicing with consistency, curiosity, and compassion. So let me know if you like this video and if you have any thoughts or questions. Subscribe to this channel so you can find out about new videos. I really hope this information is helpful for you. Know that I am rooting for you and that you can learn to be your own medicine.